I beg to move that this House has considered e-petition 657935 relating to speech and language therapy. Today I'm introducing this topic that is something which we so often take for granted, and particularly those of us who will have the opportunity to contribute to today's debate. Communication and our ability to speak and our ability to put our point on the record in the way that we do is so fundamental. Now, it's fundamental to members of Parliament because of the jobs that we do, but it is so fundamental to everybody across this country and, in fact, across the globe. The power of communication is our ability to speak, to express our thoughts, our feelings, our hopes, our needs, and our politics. It is, in its most simplistic definition, how we connect with each other. However, for some people, it's not so simple. The words are there, the feelings are there, the thoughts are there, but they just can't quite find how to get those words out. And that is so difficult for so many people. That ability to communicate and that need to connect with people is true of every single human being. And supporting people to make sure that they can always find those words and they are always able to reach that communication and reach out to others is something that I am sure everybody would support. That's where speech and language therapy steps in. Not just as a treatment, but as a lifeline. As a way to help people find the words. It's about helping people find their voice and helping them overcome the barriers that keep them from being heard. If we can't communicate, we can feel invisible, we can feel alone, which in itself is a huge challenge. Speech and language therapy is more than just a clinical service. It is absolutely vital to huge numbers of people across this great country. It's the bridge between silence and expression, isolation and inclusion. Whether it's a child who is struggling to form words, or an adult recovering from a stroke, or someone with a lifelong condition affecting communication, speech and language therapists are the unsung heroes in helping people rediscover their ability to speak, to listen and to engage with the world. Last week, I had the great privilege to speak with Mikey, who created this fantastic petition. One of the things that really struck me throughout that meeting was not just how thoughtful and how well prepared and how well read and how on top of every single part of this Mikey was, but actually in his determination that this wasn't just about him. This wasn't about Mikey's treatment, this wasn't about Mikey's journey, although he is very able to communicate that and very able to discuss that with people and very willing to do so. It was really clear that actually this isn't about Mikey. This is about Mikey standing up for people who find themselves in a similar situation to him. I think that when you get the opportunity to meet somebody who is a true campaigner and is willing to spend their time and spend their efforts on supporting people across their community, it's something that we should all applaud. And I would very much like to place on record my thanks to him for the work that he does. When I spoke with Mikey, though, he told me that actually he's one of the lucky ones. He was offered an hour of speech therapy a week. That became a huge boon to Mikey's ability to take part and Mikey's ability to develop and to just be part of the world. But he feels lucky at that because for so many people, the ability to access speech and language therapists is a postcode lottery. And it shouldn't be a matter of luck. Getting people the help that they need with something so important should be a minimum. And in fact, the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapy recommends for Mikey's conditions 4 sessions per week. Now, Mikey didn't raise that in terms of not feeling that he wasn't being supported, but he was using that as an example of actually where the current provision and the current support that's available doesn't meet the need. Even for people like Mikey, who in his own words is lucky to have the support that he's had. The waiting list for speech and language therapy for adults was, in August of last year, just over 23,500 people and over 67,000 children and young people. Every single one of those lives can be touched and every single one of those lives can be immeasurably improved by making sure that they have the treatment that they need, because that treatment allows them to rebuild the confidence that they may have lost. That was absolutely something that Mikey told me, is that actually after having his treatment, his confidence grew, he's less anxious, he's able to speak publicly with strangers and friends, he was able to get a job and catch up in education, and it's all down to the speech and language therapists who supported him in reaching his goals. It's not all down to the therapist, obviously. Mikey is responsible for a huge amount of what he's done, but his ability to be able to express himself and be able to show the world where he's coming from and what he does is down to the language therapists who supported him with him. I did also meet with the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists and Speech and Language UK, and the most striking thing that came out of those meetings was actually how important it is to look at this issue through the lens of social justice. The most striking piece of data that they shared with that is actually 25% of all children when they go to primary school have some form of diagnosed or undiagnosed speech, language and communications needs. But if we look at the most deprived areas across the country, that percentage rises to 50%. On top of that, we also have the fact that over 60% of children in young offenders institutions have communication difficulties. Now, that is too stark a reality, that is too stark a piece of information to be accident. There is something here which could be driving that. And I think by reaching out and making sure that people are able to express themselves, are able to engage with the world at large, be that school, be that friends, be that family, be that wherever it is, can support people in helping them access the world and prevent them from going down that path, which can end up with them making some difficult decisions and finding themselves incarcerated. But it's not always just about young people. There are a number of adults who develop conditions such as dementia, Parkinson's, which is very close to my heart and I will touch on a little bit later, and actually long COVID. And that's something which, obviously, as we approach the post-pandemic world, long COVID is something which we will all be talking about a lot over the coming years. The speech and language difficulties that can come with long COVID is something which has driven demand since the pandemic, although there was obviously a large amount of demand for speech and language therapists before that. If I can touch briefly on Parkinson's, I have a very close family member. My mum suffers with Parkinson's, and going from a woman who spent almost her entire adult life communicating in her second language. Mam learnt English to go to school. They spoke Welsh at home for Mam. But since she moved to England and brought me and my brothers up and lived there, she spent her whole life communicating in her second language. Mam was also fluent in French. And seeing her go where she's gone with her Parkinson's, to just not be able to find the words it's a real challenge for all of us who know my mum. Helping her to find that word and communicate herself is something that I think everybody who knows Mam would want to support. I'm sure anybody who's got relatives in a similar position would also be very eager to help support with those. Parkinson's UK did an audit of their members in 2022, and of the people they spoke to, just 40% have access to speaking language therapy, and only 8% were seen at the diagnosis stage. That's one example, and there are many, many, many conditions. I beg the House's forgiveness for raising one which is such a significant importance to myself, but it's the one where I have a lot of direct experience, and I think that was why I picked on that one condition, but there are many which can be supported through speech and language therapy. I can just return to the postcode lottery that I mentioned. There are areas of this country where ICBs are spending less than £1 per person. I think 58p was the smallest number that I saw. But actually, the best funded areas for speech and language therapy, the ICB was spending £16.35 per child who was receiving therapy. That's a vast, vast, vast difference. Now, I'm not going to try and say that ICBs aren't doing their job, and obviously there are regional disparities, and ICBs have got to cut their cloth according to the funding that's available. We are all aware of that. But when you see such a significant disparity of around 32 times the amount being spent in one area and another, it does highlight that actually for far too many people, it's a real fight to get the support that they need, because the funding isn't there. And I think I'd be very interested to hear the Minister's response to that, about anything in the long-term 10-year plan for the NHS. There's something that can be done there to set minimum standards, or whether there's anything that the government is intending to do to hopefully level the playing field between different areas. For many people, especially those from disadvantaged communities, they live in areas where services are scarce and where waiting times are long, and that can exacerbate some of the issues that those communities face, as well as the individuals affected. It's not always just about funding. And we know that the answer isn't always just to put more money into the system. Where it's needed, it should be there, but actually recruiting and retaining speech and language therapists is so vital, because no amount of funding in the world can replace a human being who's actually doing that role, and the skill and the training and the care that those people have for the people they are supporting. There is a shortage of therapists in our system, and many are leaving the profession due to burnout, insufficient support and unsustainable workloads. When I spoke to the Royal College, they were very clear that actually recruitment is one side of this coin, but retainment is absolutely a part of this as well. It's not just an operational necessity, but it's actually how we not only increase the number of speech and language therapists there are available, but make sure that the more experienced people can train and support and mentor people who are less experienced in getting through those grades from grade 5 to grade 6 and so on. A survey by the Royal College found that 17% of speech and language therapy roles are currently vacant. That's a huge number, that's almost 1 in 5. And actually, by making sure that we have the right number of people here to support this vital care that people need, it can have such a profound effect right across the country. The biggest shortages are amongst Band 6 and Band 7s in the NHS, the more specialist roles. But across the board, therapists are saying that they want to do this job. Nobody goes into healthcare for the money. Everybody goes in there because it's a vocation, because something they really want to support their community and support people where they really need it. And they really want to be able to do that. But in order to do so, we've got to do something on caseloads. We've got to do something on making sure that people are able to devote enough time to each of the people that they see. To close, Mr Vickers, I am very proud that the government will be bringing forward a 10-year plan to offer a vision of a healthier, more resilient NHS. I think how well supported this petition has been, and given the importance of it to the people who are in need of speech and language therapy, I'm very eager to hear that the government is taking this very seriously to make sure that speech and language therapy is fully integrated into that 10-year plan, so that we can look much more at preventative care, get community services to deliver the support where it's most needed, and prevent those acute issues developing. Ultimately, this debate, and I'm very glad to see so many honourable members and right honourable members from across the House here, it's an opportunity for us to talk about speech and language therapy, make sure that it's got the place that it deserves in the heart of our health system. I'm sure there's much more that many others will like to say, and I very much look forward to the honourable member opposite and his contributions. But on that basis, I so move. Thank you, Mr.